Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Dream Labs. I am Dr. Contrast and I am live. And above all else, I am really, really excited about being back in operation here. I just want to take a moment to recognize, for example, those of you who are really kind enough to watch and over the course of time be with me from month to, or day to day and month to month and a period of time. I really appreciate the fact that your understanding of that what happened to me last week. We had to miss a day due to a situation. My wife's sister passed away. We had to travel and got that taken care of and out of the way. But my sincere thank you to all of you who have sent some very kind, very notices about the matter we had to face, and much appreciated. But I'm really good to be back on the broadcast today. And I think what I really want to do is, for what it's worth, I want to go back a little bit of histrionics and explain why I'm going that route. Some time ago, I think you remember, we had a program and a presentation where we did the whole concept development for an aircraft system, and a tactical aircraft, advanced fighter like Star Citizen material aircraft called HS-108P. Hammerhead Shark, so it was an absolute biomimicry piece we did, and the whole concept behind that was to look at that biomimicry piece, put it in an aircraft concept, and designate it as a 108 HS-108P. But some time ago before that, we had a Micron piece. It was that initial concept. And I went back and looked at that, and it just looked tired and not quite the same as being very contemporary, very tact-like, and very stealthy looking, and very intimidating. So I went back and looked at the histrionics, and today I'm going to go back to that, kind of review a little bit, and show you what I'm going to take place here to develop a whole new process of developing shape studies for tactical aircraft. And I picked a couple of done some homework ahead of time, and really the purpose of today's stream is going to be very simple. What I want to do is develop something, for example, a family of shapes, a series of sketches, which I'll show you in a few moments here, and go through it all and hopefully get some feedback from you if you tune in today about what they're going to look like and what you think is maybe a strong contender for what I want to do is from that whole HS-108P series, take that concept and bring it down a little bit in scale and be a little more nimble with it, and a little bit more stealth-like, or organic looking. So that's the objective for today's stream. So hopefully you'll bear with me here. So I brought back up this sketch, for example. We'll start here. This sketch was done maybe about a month or so ago in the development of this whole HS-108P series. And what happened for me is to look through a series of little form studies like this, or real quick sketch studies, to look at section, body form. This is a little bit of half section with the wing disappearing here. It's body shape being very organic and triangular in form. And from 1 to 2, and putting the piece together. Maybe a plan view look, a little bit busy here, and then an elevation. And I think the thing that really struck me about this sketch, this family start for this new aircraft, attack aircraft, was how this began to look like a lot more aggressive looking, a little more intimidating with the cockpit rear, the hammerhead system up front for maybe that's a series of communication or telegraphy or even radar systems. So all that's part of the whole process. And then I went this one again, looking at it, and if I look at the front elevation, the wing form's it's a blended wing process, but it has a little bit more, a little flatter look to it. But I wanted to take that thing and just crank it down a little bit. So that's what led to this study right here. Took that same basic overall shape, body form, but again, took the wing structure, just dropped that down about maybe 30 degrees to get more of a butterfly look to it here. So from that sketch, let me move here very quickly. That was the first piece of introduction. We got to that. Then I began to look at, well, what about the possibility of getting that look at overhead rear view, cockpit area here, the plan form of the wing study, and the hammerhead approach up front, still there. All the little pieces are still there. But again, the concept, and when I look at, again, the elevation, I took this whole thing, again, there's a little bit of a break here, you can see in the section studies, but it didn't drop. That should have really dropped dramatically, but it wasn't really there. So I came back again to this elevation, and all of a sudden, that started to make some sense for us here. So interesting how that began to come back. Body form up, very straight, cockpit rear, and an extremely bent or fractured wing surface, which really helped the system to go back in the freshness. So from that sketch, I moved along to, let's bring this family of forms in here. I brought these guys along, so I thought, let's go back to that look here. What if I take this same approach here that we showed you initially? What if I took that same approach and went a little further with it and reduced some of the weight back here, and went back into this kind of approach here, where we actually take the same overall body form, but brought them up a little bit and added another wing underneath it all that maybe was the flexibility or the articulating portion of the design process itself. So again, it was much more of a blended wing, everything up on top coming out the fuselage. A little bit of a lower system, sounds like a quadra wing system. But again, looking at that, I thought that's interesting. The new munition system on the upboard side, new canards, and again, some potential radar or even artillery pieces up front. Intake surfaces here, and again, the lower wing that tucked in underneath this high platform wing to give you more draw or more lift underneath that wing system. So that started it. That was a front three-quarter. Going back to that again, looking at the whole massage system going back and forth. That was it there. Then I went to the rear three-quarter, where all of a sudden you had a little bit of a different view at it here. Pardon me, just won't rewind that. Again, same basic overall body form, very triangular, very sheer looking, almost polar triangle-like in body form for shape study. Again, remember the whole theme today is to develop new aircraft shape studies. What are we looking at as far as aero systems? What are the shapes going to look like? Do we want to go more stealthy? Do we want to go softer with it? More aggressive looking? And I think the whole idea for me today was to take the whole history of the old sketch, the HS-108P series, you'll see in a moment, and then go back into that and begin to develop that further and take it maybe a little nimbler, a little bit smaller, and a lot more, for lack of another term, an escort fighter of some sort that has some real guts behind it. So, but again, notice high wing up on top, blended into the body form, and then below that secondary wing where it kind of tucks it underneath and has a munition system on the upboard side of that. So, and again, cockpit rear, double canards. Again, interesting. That was neat, though. It was an interesting set of circumstances to work with. So there's a lot of pieces and parts going together with it. But still, in the investigation process, there's always a flexibility. There's always a change that comes about, and I think that's what the thing that I'm intrigued by. You know, one little line to another, one little shape to another. You can say, that's interesting. That's interesting. So the inspiration comes as a result of making little subtle changes and then analyzing what the real intent is. And again, the intent is to get a really good, solid aircraft fighting system that looks like it's nimble, more aggressive looking, and far more intimidating. So that was the rear three-quarter. Then, if you remember, I went back into these guys. Let's get these underneath out of the way here for just a moment. I went back to these shape studies and looking at what we had there initially. And again, back to that whole, let's see, where is that one sketch here that has that? Let's go back to that long little study here. Sorry. Go back to this shape where, yeah, this guy here. All of a sudden, there's a relationship beginning to build here between that and that. This is the earlier study. And this one began to come back in and say, okay, let's take that and put some beef to this thing. So that was another concept sketch for this new HS-108P series. So that's where we are there. So that led me to that system, which is kind of interesting. Get this back in order. So we put it back in the portfolio. So I went from that family to this family. That was a little front three-quarter, landing gear down. Again, notice you'll see that again, the body form is very similar. And then the actual fractured wing, the butterfly system, and then the lower piece underneath, the munition system, and the intake snuggled underneath there. A little bit of draft in between the upper and lower wing that helped kind of create this whole new look of a different tactical fighter. So from that, then I went from that study to this study. And notice now you can really see where the wing drops. This is what's interesting here. Going back to this whole idea of there's a little bit of a front three-quarter, rearward canopy, again, very aggressive underwing, intake system, drop wing, munitions again, basic overall, just walking around the shape and seeing what's taking place in it and developing a really good, solid, fundamental approach to the whole idea of getting this tactical fighter to look very evil looking, which wasn't present in the first one I did a year or two ago on the initial Shark system. It just didn't have the same romance or viciousness about it. So that was part of the attack plan here. Then, from there, let's go back to get this stack up on top here. Let's go back from there. I'm going to do a series of just finally doing some final sketch rendering systems of that whole process. This was the initial theme study here. That started it. That was it. And I went from that family into this family. Again, at rest, on the ground, a little bit of architecture behind it, like maybe it's the base system of some sort. And then the aircraft at rest, canopy closed, and cockpit or pilots, for example, triad of three. So worked pretty interesting. That had some health to it. What I liked about this, and I should be very careful how I state this, The preference I had in this concept, I felt so much better in terms of making that whole biomimicry piece from a year ago fit the package we were doing in this HS108P. As I said before, the original one was too soft, wasn't aggressive looking enough. Yeah, it had mimicry to it, but it didn't have that whole attack look to it. I mean, I think this one does. So that was one sketch that we started with it. And then I did another variation where you'll see the difference here in a moment. This is a very sleek looking lower wing, and then this gets a little bulkier. This goes back to that heavier look here that we had earlier on. Again, set of three, architecture behind it. Again, scale change. I mean, just lifting that up a little bit and putting more fracture in the nose piece. So notice the difference between this one here. Look how that nose piece just comes in slight and just drops. Whereas this comes along, breaks and breaks again. So the lift here is a little higher. Again, same cockpit rearward. And then here's that lower wing system we're talking about. And then again, intake and exhaust. Good things happening, I think. The shapes were interesting. It was an intriguing plan of action. And I think this one helped me settle. Yeah, I think we did the whole biomimicry piece some justice by getting more aggressive with it. Again, this whole, you can't see it in this view, but the lower piece has that same hammerhead shark look at it with the radar telegraph system or maybe a munition system out front. So that started it there. Now from that, this is where it gets interesting. From that, let me just kind of set a precedent here. From this whole family, from start to finish in the stream here today, I think what you notice there, it's been a progression of, oh yeah, we took it from thumbnail sketch, section study, into a what if and a what if, and then developed the final forms and presented two finished illustrations of that. I went back into that this week, looking at the old inventory. I got back from our trip, and I began to look at this, and I said, what if we did another variation on this? And I'm going to go back and look at this thing. It's one of the things I've really loved to do over the course of time. I mean, I'm involved in all types of design systems here. I love architecture, interior space, product design, product identity, benchmarking work, landscape architecture. It's marvelous. I mean, I enjoy all those disciplines. But there's something about transportation design, and especially not so much cars, but aircraft. Aircraft design, to me, is intriguing because the technology, like automobile design, is rapidly changing. And it becomes more and more intriguing because you can take chances with it. You can go out there outside the envelope of understanding and create things that might look impossible, but once you begin to work with them, massage them a little bit, it could be really intriguing. And again, the biggest thing for me is it's the learning cycle, looking at something new, being challenged by something. Really interesting how it all begins to take effect. So from this family of shapes, I went back in, and when I put together the program this past week, I thought, well, let's take another look at this thing and take the same concept, not so much the hammerhead shark, but just the tactical fighter approach, and let's go back in and generate some ideas here that'll deal with the whole concept of aircraft design, shape studies, aeronautical design systems, just getting it all freshened up a little bit and taking another look at maybe some really interesting shapes other than these very sheer, almost geometric forms that we're looking at here. So let's go that route, and I'm going to do this. That goes to that, and let's get these out of the way just for a moment. We'll come back to those in just a second here. Now, interesting. I went back in and just did some really rough little pencil sketches here of this new generation, what we call it today's stream, looking at the method of developing new shapes and form for aero systems. So I've gone through here as a series of pencil sketches that just looking at new shapes, for example, elevations, a little bit of perspective. Notice there's a lot of softness in this guy, and a lot of sheerness in this guy, sheerness in this guy. We're getting down to a minimum surface that really starts to spell out this whole idea of getting a lighter, more nimble aircraft study, or studies that can be generated into some concept sketches, which I'll be doing probably next week. So again, just to make sure the record is straight here today, this is an intro piece of a big, broad brush of design concept ideas. Hopefully, if you look at this thing, and if you're watching today, I would really appreciate it if you kind of send in some information or drop me a note at my website and my email address. I'll give you at the end of the show to have you any prefaces about what approach we took here, and we can go from there. So again, very loose pencil sketches, looking at different ways of approaching these shapes. And most of them you'll see a lot of very crisp, hard lines, which I still think is interesting. It's almost like a takeoff on a variation of the F-117 Nighthawk. That thing was still, to me, one of the most intriguing-looking, evil-looking aircrafts out there in the fleet. The Lightning, the 35 is neat, but it doesn't have that same personality that the F-117 had. There's something about that just looked really almost Darth Vader-like, really intriguing. So from that, this again back to the sequence, looking at new shapes. How are we going to take the next generation in? And the idea for me today is to take a look at these are the passes, and probably between now and next week, I'll maybe make a couple of selections and start doing some little pencil sketches live next week, and I'm going to do some color illustration work. And I'll make some announcements at the end too about program that's coming along. So I've been working on that as well. So there's a lot of interest in these shapes. The thing I've always found intriguing, and I get a kick out of this every time I go through a series of sketches, for example. Yeah, you do an elevation like this, but what does that start to look like in perspective? Because these forms can really deceive you. I mean, are you looking at roundness? Are you looking at breaks and fractures in the right place? All these parts are part of the thinking process to make these forms and shapes come together. So it's always a challenge. You can lay down, for example, you can lay down a very interesting elevation, especially in aircraft design. But the trick is to get fuselage, wing, all the support members to kind of blend in and make a real solid statement. And maybe the element of surprise comes along too. That I've never discounted. Now, transportation design, you lay down an elevation, pretty well you can see where the imagination is taking you as far as section, detail, scale, format, stance, etc. All that begins to happen together. So this is a different discipline altogether because it really taxes you to think internally and in the third dimension. Even though the elevation has no perspective to it, you're seeing the perception of the third dimension in it. At least I am. I practice that. So there's a sketch. There's one. There's another plan view studies. Now all of a sudden, again, notice very dart-like, very sheer, very straightforward, almost aero systems here with some canards and the dihedrals off the tail section, exhaust system here, cockpit forward, much more dart, and again, another dart inside that. It's almost one layer over another, where you start to see one dart coming over the top of the other. This one, if I were to eliminate the wing forms here, if I cover this up, a sheet of paper, yeah, if I did this, if I covered that up and said, you know, that's not bad, just a pure stealth system like that could be interesting. So I'm keeping all these options open so that we begin to develop some pencil sketches. That might be a candidate. This could be as well. But plan views are always interesting too, because especially in aircraft design, the element of surprise from an elevation to a plan view is that one can kind of dictate the other. And what's neat about plan view work is you get to see the relationship of scale, line study, shape, form, integration of systems. It all works together to blend this whole idea of being conceptual in developing those systems. So that's a plan view series of the new stuff we're looking at here. There's another little set. Now, really went radical here. I thought, what if we did, using this whole idea of this technology piece of getting new shapes? What if we got so daring that if you look, for example, the F-117 again, interesting how that was very dart-like, very triangular, again, very Darth Vader-like, and the extreme plan view, that plan view of that 117 was almost like this guy here. Let's go back, sheet of paper. It almost had that look to it right there. So it was just a pure dart, and with the twin canard tails come off the back of it. But I thought, you know, what if we took that and really did something that was neat about that in terms of this guy? What if we did that and pure, in this plan view right here, just a pure diamond. That's just a very straightforward, no nonsense, there it is. In plan view, it looks interesting. Elevation, it's interesting. Now, the problem is when you go into perspective, this is what I'm referring to earlier. You put an elevation together, looks one way. You go to a plan view, yeah, it dictates another way. But the real secret to success is what happens when you rotate those two views into perspective. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I think the weight here is way too bulky. It's a bit too high, a bit too sheer. So maybe another pass for next week is to take this whole idea and almost compress that triangle down here, that whole wedge area, and compress it down and get a little more spread to it. Might be a much more formidable package to look at. But I thought it was interesting how you could take this whole cockpit area, exhaust area, back slope, for example, this back slope here, and this is where the exhaust area is, and add a canard here and a dual canard dihedral series. And again, an intake piece here that kind of draws air right in the system. Here's the intake here. Notice a little bit of a shelf here, This is more flush. This had a little bit more of a shelf to it. And again, look at how that cuts into in the plan view, how this view here, that's what it might look like in the plan view, where that piece cuts right back into the body form itself. So a lot of things to think about, but I think that's part of the fun about being into changing subject matter and going from one discipline to another to develop, especially today, like this shape study for new aero systems or aircraft systems. So that was a very bold approach to take a real big swing at this thing as far as much more triangulated looks here. So let's go, let's get another sketch here. I'll turn it over here. Another page here. Again, maybe a little, again, notice this started to make some really interesting forms here. This one's a little softer. Had this whole cantilever, the wings coming forward and intakes. A little bit of an elevation here. It's not quite the same piece. This is a modification of the one up on top here. A little softer with the drop dihedrals on the ends. Again, notice very much triangular. Cockpit area, so it's almost a parallelepiped, where there's a lot more geometry to it. And again, but this one was interesting. That came back to almost a mirror image of, let's do this. That belonged in that family right there. Look at how that shape, by just altering that back line here, that drive line, and dropping it quick into the tail section, lightened it up a little bit and gave it a lot more substance to it. So I think these are the things I'll be looking at between now and next Wednesday to develop a little further. Very intriguing set of circumstances, and to me it's a real challenge because you're thinking in multi-dimensions all the time. But the main thrust is, for me, today, is to get across how critical it is to take the time to generate a lot of sketches, put a lot of ideas together. They're not going to be great. These are not great sketches, but their concept of thinking about, okay, what if this? What if happens here? What if we do about this? What if we take that variation and go a little further in the theme? So these all become helpful in developing a resolve or an idea. So I go back to this page again. That one was intriguing to me. So there's a lot of things here I've passed throughout the last few minutes that to me are very interesting and looking forward to working with, and we'll see what comes out of it. Again, this is I think the real passion for me is, what am I learning? What am I picking up about the whole creative process? What does it take to get something down? How much information do you need? Do you have to overkill it? Do you have to simplify it? Those are matters of real importance, especially when you're working on design. For those of you out there in the audience who are working with design firms, for example, no matter what the discipline is, you know how critical that efficiency side of it is. That's what these sketches help you do. Yeah, you'll spend some time going through the idea of what ifs and variations on theme, but in the end, it's extremely powerful to have on your hand. And if you do this in front of a client, magical. I've done this for years. I mean, in front of a client, we'll sit down, like cars, whenever what the discipline is, just listen to people speak about their conversation and what they want to expect out of it. And you start drawing in front of them or illustrating their thoughts in front of them. And they'll say, that's a great idea. Yes, it is, because it's yours. This is a translation of your speech in the visual method. So that's the neat thing about this whole process. Let's move along here. Again, further exploration, intriguing shape here. I think that has some potential. So let's look at this. Come back over here. And the last one I did was going back to some very super soft, almost dolphin-like characterization to just shape studies. Again, notice, very fluid. The intake system underneath, the engine system, and this whole wing system kind of breaks off the body form and creates a blended wing look, but it's a little newer looking. It's almost, it might be a bit scale-wise for an attack fighter, but I think that's some potential. Notice how I minimize the shape from that length down to this length here. And again, pardon me, interesting shape. Now, it's canards, and this little breaks, that whole form, that whole back form comes out and drops off gently into that sheared break, and this little arrow is an actual deflector or a canard in the other view. So minimize, maximum length, minimize the length, and then into a plan view setting. I mean, look how this one, for example, could relate to this one. With that whole body form, what has to happen here, that whole fuselage has to come over the top, drop into those wings, and let that thing drape into the shape itself. This one, again, is a trade selection, a little bit more. This is kind of a freeloader off of this guy. Maybe this is a lot rounder up on top. Maybe we take this shape here, which mimics this form, and begin to break out of that with some really hard-edged, really solid-looking forms and very geometric look to it. So it's a combination of two skills here. So that led me to that. And as we go here, I'll bring these up here. Now, the next generation of sketches were really basically themes coming off of this family of forms here. What if I took that same family of forms, oops, let me do this family of forms, and went into some little further studies about what it would happen and what it might take to get some of these guys to work for us. So again, finished that set, then moved on to this. Notice here again, I've used that same very fluid looking upper piece to it, and got back into this whole blended wing look. No tails, very straightforward. These canards are parallel to body form. This comes off. Let me do this so I can show you what's taking place here. What's happening here is this. We're coming off of this guy with, off the shape, let's cut a section here. That comes off, rolls in, body form. Rolls in, body form. Rolls in, very fluid. Back into here. Now it starts to make transitions. Back in again. Again, into a negative cut, back out of it again, into wing form. Now the real plan here is now that canard drops. Again, a little spine here. That spine comes up off of that shape, down to that form, and then as we go back, and then this area back here is absolutely stays right with it. That's all part of the whole process. So it comes down. That stays flat. So that's what that section say it looks like in that form. So hopefully that's working for us here. So again, same thing here. Notice that spine disappears, and it comes into a flat, and it comes up back to this over here, comes into that, and again carries on into a valley, and that's all very flat, but at the same time, pardon me, comes across, but it gives you that whole blended wing form. Everything's up on top, and the wing surface is all part of the body form. So it's not separated, so to speak. So again, notice this is interesting too. Let's go back to this one. Body shape, into a nacelle. Round form, into an undercut. Round form, canopy, into an undercut. Round form, undercut. Again, notice that whole thing is negative, so that's the intake, and the exhaust is back here. Now, notice what that section tells me. Now it goes from soft to almost a spine, and into the wings, rolls over, spine rolls over. Again, same thing here, very fractured, into that, and rolls over, and then rolls over. Again, the other direction, that to me, it's such a simple, the really neat thing about this is, and I hope I'm not rambling here too much, but the great thing about this whole exercise is you lay down shape, and you put forms together. Then you go back in and treat it with section. And the real trick for me, for this week's stream, is to look at aircraft design as a blended shape. It's all integrated. Even though you've got a lot of bits and parts and pieces, it begins to integrate itself and make some really solid statements. And again, this is a great challenge here, because you're going from a very round form into a very sheer form, round form into a very sheer form, round form into a very sheer form. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue here. And even though this looks like it's all moving through space in different axes in different directions, they're really not. They're all part of that same upper blended wing look, but yet adding pieces for aerodynamics and stability purposes to make the thing fly. And notice, each one are really, what I'm starting to move toward is the whole idea of getting just the pure shape down, no tail fins, all wing, and just a lifting body approach. So that's what I'm after here in terms of, and you'll see in a moment here. So from that study, I thought, okay, let's take a look at this round shape here, and begin to take a look at what it might look like, for example, in an attack series, a fighter. So there's my overhead view of this guy. That starts to maybe make some sense. All of a sudden, again, notice, very strong, bold wedge look to it. Again, that's all part of the process. Let me get that down just a bit. Hopefully you can see that okay. That whole idea of being very spear-like, and again, notice the two large engine nacelles, intakes, a little bit of a drop-off in through here in the body form, laddering shape, canopy split. It's dihedrals again for stability, but it's just a one big lifting body. So that was one of the outgrowths of these sketches here. I just took that same family of shapes and went right straight to a pure wedge, and simplified it even more so to get the whole idea of the pattern to work for us here. So that was really neat. This is a good exercise to go through. Notice from start to finish, every culmination, every step along the way, becoming, hopefully you're seeing this, and I hope I'm not out of order here. You're seeing it become more and more refined, much more simplified. It's getting down to an essence. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to between now and next week. We're doing some rendering exercises. I'll pick some of these selections, modify them, and come back and show us next week. Do a little bit of some little pencil sketches, and then move into that into color. This will be about a 2 or 3 weeks process here. So hope you stay with me. If you're tuned in today, I'd love to have you stay with me for the following to come. So that was one approach. Now, another one. Look at that. Ooh, I went down to a ground effect piece. So all of a sudden, again, look at that whole blended wing piece. Canards. And again, intake. There's intake up on top here. Intake up on top there. It's just really cool stuff to work with. Very conventional canopy. But again, this whole idea, notice how that whole shape, very much formulated, very, very integrated. Not a lot of fracturing to it. I just got it down to ground level here. And again, my apologies. This is just a loose sketch. I'm not doing any detail work here. Once we get into that, I might take this guy and open it up, go a little bit larger with it, and open it up just a touch, and then just for what it's worth here. So we make sure what's taking place. This is all canopy. This area here, for example, all of this. Let me just kind of put a little bit of study in here. All of this is now intake. That's intake. Won't finish it. There's one. Here's the other. As I rotate this just a touch. Let's move it on this side. So what does that do for me? Notice how it emphasizes that whole, almost a mirror image, upper to lower, split line right through the center, and it just accentuates the width of this aircraft. That's proportional, and that's part of the exercise I wanted to move into with this guy. It's just that unique in terms of being able to take a look at simple, subtle changes. For example, from this one, let's go back and do this just for a second here. This one, there's where the intake is. Right side here. There it is. Look how subtle it is. Slipstreams coming across the body form, into the intake, in and out. Again, it's all very fluid, very simple. Shadow underneath these are canards. They can adjust or move, give us stability. That's part of the process. So that's one. And then again, from that variation, again, a little more. This is much more. If I cut a section through this, it's this up and down, same overall shape. But I added where some of the canards or the fender or the body side forms, a little bit more body in the fuselage to make that work. So that's that. And we went from that one to this one. Again, notice that to me, that was an intriguing view. I'm going to take a look at that in the plan view now, maybe an elevation, to get this stuff to work here. Again, intake, for example, landing gear. There's a bit of a deception here. This is the front landing gear here, right and left, or left-hand side and right-hand side landing gear at the middle of the aircraft. So that was a body form on that guy. Interesting to look at. So interesting series of studies. Again, very little. These canards are up on the wing form. So as we go back in the plan view, this is a very large plan view, much like this one is, but it has a different character up front and a different underbody structure to it. So interesting things. Let me put that back one to the other. Now I took that same theme and said, okay, now what if I don't have a conventional canopy on this thing? Maybe we keep it all nice and fluid and very low profile. From that, we went to that. Nope, let's do this. So I'll bring this back in a moment. From this, there's the initial concept. And then we went from that to this. Notice, look at the difference in the character. All of a sudden, man, that thing looks really spooky. Let's do this. Intake. To intake. I'm going to beep in this thing. Look how that very slender intake piece really starts to mirror image or telegraph this whole idea of being extremely stealth-like. Notice the difference from this one, where we have the actual tail system. Let's do this. This is rudders. If I can get those guys to come together now. Look at the difference between this setup here, where they're actually, the canards are outboard and flared a little bit, a la F-35 Lightning, but these come back inboard and kept it all strong. They could actually move as well. But the idea was to bring it all, condense it in, and it kept the same canards, same system here, different tail surface up on top, canopy, much more flush as opposed to where we are here with this one. So really interesting change of pace. So I think that's an interesting set of family of forms here from start to finish. And I think what I'm really going to look at here, for example, I'm excited about for next week, is to take a look at some of these ideas and begin to develop them further and take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of history here. Let's go back and forth. Last study, development here, and then into this very large plan form here, basic form, there it was, and then from that whole family of three came as a result of saying this shape of series of ideas. And let's sign it up so we can see it as we go down the line here. Then back to some little thumbnail sketches, 8.5 by 11s, to generate some ideas, which became part of the process. I won't go through all of them now, but they helped. That last, that page became a product of some of the studies here. And back to this, let's put that together. That's where that family of shapes went, part of it all. And back to some of the earliest development of the actual initial HS108P. This is what started it all. Let's go back to look at this thing. As I said over the last week in preparing this program for today, let's go back to histrionics and keep refining this whole idea of fighter jet systems and analyze not so much a brand, but a shape studies. How do you generate ideas? What's the process of developing those ideas? So again, that's the other illustration of that piece. Then back to some of the development sketches of this guy. We started with that series. Then we had that one. Then we had that one that kind of follows suit, so that goes underneath here. That's that to that. And then last but not least, some of these other studies here, for example, way back on some of the early second generation Macaron studies, front and rear 3/4, and then where it all started was right here. Going back to this family of shapes right here to give us some idea of what's the next generation in the process going to look like. This is one category, obviously, of aircraft design, but I thought it was interesting today, hopefully, to share some information today about how not so much that my thinking process is absolute, but to share with you the thinking process I use to go from one phase to another, to another, to another. So often you'll see, for example, during this whole generation of ideas, you saw a wide range of change and then a very narrow range of change, and I think that's the idea. To me, going through the creative process, I've always used this system, for example, and it's very, very helpful. You maximize the approach and minimize the choices. And then back to maximizing the choices and then minimize the choices. Maximize the approach, minimize the choices. It prevents you, I think, hope I can say this with a lot of respect, so don't misunderstand what I'm about to say here. It prevents us from becoming repetitive and traditional. One of the things you don't want to do in this business is become dependent upon your favorite shapes and rely on the fact that you love this form, you love this color. That's fine, but the more you expand out of that and the more you grow, then the more intriguing your approach to problem solving becomes, the more inspiring it is, and the more intriguing it is, and the more captive it is. It really moves you on. So that was the idea today, folks, just from behind the scenes here, to show you some of the process of what the method of developing an idea might look like. And I used that Macaron system from 2 years ago into the HS series, into this new generation, which I haven't really titled yet. I'm just going to keep it like conceptual escort fighter studies. Maybe I'll put a designation to it. I don't know. We'll look at it. But my task between now and next week is to take some of these ideas, hopefully the best of the best, and begin to put some pencil sketches together, 11 by 17, therefore, just to look at shape and some composition pieces. I picked this one, and I might take this one, and maybe I'll pick 3 and develop them a little further. So hope you stay with me next week. And again, if you're viewing and not on the chat line and you've watched here today, I would really appreciate it if you saw something you liked or would want to comment on. Please feel free to reach me at jim@drcontrast.com. That's my email address. Love to have you be part of the process. And Antares, if he's watching this or sees it a bit later, please feel free to offer some insight here, Antares, and I hope you're doing well. And anybody else out there, for example, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Really appreciate it. And once again, in conclusion, thank you for all the very kind commentary about the situation we had to face 2 weeks ago with my sister's death. I had to miss last week. But I used that time to put together an agenda and a program of things to come that I think you'll intriguing by. And I think I want to add this too, just for not to take a lot of time, but just want to add this. I'm going to take a look here after this aircraft study of doing some really, hopefully, some light and helpful and insightful training systems on methodology for marker technique, pencil sketch rendering skills, volumetric studies, back to some basic things from the learning cycle. That's going to, I do that because I need it. Hopefully it'll be of some help to you. So again, if you have any ideas about how I can help you with certain things, and if I'm capable of, I'll be more than happy to help you do that. Contact me at jim@drcontrast.com. And I'd love to be able to work with you and help you through the process. So all that to say, a lot of fun today, a lot of different variations on theme, and to me that's part of the intrigue. You don't get lost in the woods. You find where the great trees are. That's really neat about the whole idea about conceptual thinking here. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Please visit my website, drcontrast.com. There's a lot of neat stuff on there to look at. We're still trying to figure out what to do with the store. I don't know how that's going to happen yet. It's really kind of a sad, serious story. A lot of options to look at. We're trying to find somebody who does instant feedback and instant sending, and so it's just very difficult to find. So we're looking at it carefully. But on top of all that, again, take the time to look at the website for some opinion. If you have anything to add to it or would like to see things changed or done, feel free to do so. We'll do the best we can to accommodate that. And above all else, before the end of the day here, I've always really felt strongly about this, and I really believe with all my heart. Never forget to dare to remember to be great, because you are. Have a great week, folks. We'll see you next Wednesday, and we'll continue this whole series of getting these forum studies down for aircraft technology. Thank you so much. Take care, and all the very best. Bye-bye.